Welcome to The Explainer. You know, some moments in history are so huge, they don't just start a new faith. They reveal something deep about character, about wisdom, and really about human connection. And today, we're diving right into one of those moments, the story of the very first revelation in Islam.
So, where does this story begin? Well, it's not on a grand stage, not with a big sermon or on some battlefield. No, it starts in a much more personal, a much more raw human moment. Picture this. A man is coming back from a mountain cave, and his heart is just pounding, trembling with this incredible mix of awe and, honestly, pure terror.
And what were the first words he said when he got home? It wasn't some grand declaration, it wasn't a sermon, it was just a simple, desperate plea. Cover me. Cover me. I mean, you can just feel the shock in those words, right? This was someone who had just been through an experience that shook him to his absolute core.
Okay, so to really understand why he was so shaken and to get the full weight of what happens next, we have to rewind a little bit. We need to go back to that mountain cave and look at the encounter that set this whole thing in motion.
So he had been spending time in solitude and meditation in the cave of Hira. This was something he often did. And it's there that he's visited by the angel Jibril. And let's be clear, this was not some gentle, quiet whisper. This was a powerful, overwhelming encounter. It left him completely drained, both physically and emotionally, and suddenly he's carrying the weight of the very first divine verses.
And what's the first thing he says to his wife, Khadeejah? He confesses, "I fear for myself." Basically, I think I might be going mad. Can you just imagine the vulnerability in that moment? The man who had gone to guide millions is right here expressing this deep, human fear that maybe it was all a delusion.
Now, think about it. In this moment of total crisis, of pure confusion, what kind of response do you think he got? Was it panic? Was it doubt? Not at all. What he received was an act of incredible wisdom and clarity from his wife, Khadeejah. And remember, she's the very first person to ever hear about this.
Her response was just immediate, and it was absolute. She says, "Never. By Allah, Allah will never forsake you." It's this powerful, unwavering declaration of faith. And what's amazing is, it's not even faith in the message yet, it's faith in the man, faith in his character. She became the very first anchor in this huge, turbulent sea of uncertainty.
And this is the really incredible part. Her belief wasn't just blind emotion, it was completely rooted in logic. She basically laid out an argument for him. She started listing his qualities, reminding him of the man he was. You connect with your family, you help the weak, you're generous, you're hospitable, you aid people in need. In her mind, it was simple. A person like that, well, God would never ever forsake or deceive someone like that.
You see, her calm, logical analysis of who he was as a person led her to only one possible conclusion. This had to be divine truth, not some kind of delusion. Her strength, her wisdom, it was absolutely transformative. She literally took this moment of pure personal terror, and with her faith in his character, turned it into the foundational stone for an entire spiritual community.
But Khadeejah's wisdom didn't stop there. She was smart. She knew that an event this monumental needed more context, It needed to be placed within a bigger historical and spiritual picture. So she decided they needed to talk to someone with deep knowledge of the scriptures that came before.
And that someone was her cousin, Waraqah ibn Nawfal. Now, Waraqah was this really knowledgeable Christian man who had studied the previous scriptures. He was basically a living link to the traditions of the past. If anyone could understand and maybe, just maybe, validate what had happened in that cave, it was him.
So they go to him and they tell him the whole story. And after listening, Waraqah's reaction is immediate. He identifies the messenger as An-Namus, which is another name for the angel Jibril. And he says this is the exact same angel that was sent to Moses. I mean, wow, this was it. This was the crucial link, the confirmation that connected this brand new revelation to the long, ancient line of Abrahamic prophecy.
But with that incredible confirmation also came something a little more sobering, a prophecy. Because Waraqah, with all his knowledge, knew that the path of a true messenger is never, ever easy. He knew what was coming next.
Waraqah's first reaction wasn't just, "Oh, I believe you." It was actually a kind of lament. He said, "I wish I were a strong young man. I wish I could be alive when your own people drive you out." He was sad that he'd be too old to be there to support him through the tough times he knew were just around the corner.
And the prophet was just stunned. Will they really expel me?
And you have to understand why he was so shocked. This is a man known in his community as Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. He was respected. The idea that his own people, his own tribe in Mecca, would one day kick him out, it was just unthinkable to him.
But Waraqah's answer was so clear and so stark. He just says yes. No man has ever brought what you are bringing without being treated like an enemy. And what's so powerful here is that this wasn't just Waraqah's opinion. He was speaking from a deep understanding of history. He was pointing out a pattern, a cycle that just seems to repeat itself with every single prophet.
And if you look, you can see this pattern pop up again and again in the scriptures, right? You have the people of Prophet Lut rejecting him. You have the arrogant chiefs threatening to drive out Prophet Shuaib. It's a theme. Whenever someone comes with a divine message that shakes up the status quo, the reaction is almost always hostility. It's almost always a threat of being cast out.
So even with this prophecy of all this hardship to come, there was one thing that remained a constant, unwavering foundation through it all. And that was the bond between the prophet and Khadeejah. Their relationship, their love and loyalty, it's just timeless.
And get this, years later, the very same angel Jibreel who brought that first terrifying revelation came back with a message specifically for Khadeejah. He told the prophet to give her greetings directly from God and to give her the good news of a house waiting for her in paradise, a house made of hollowed pearls with no noise and no exhaustion inside, which is just a perfect reflection of the peace and comfort she gave her husband here on earth.
And his love for her, his loyalty, it was just boundless. For the rest of his life, even years after she had passed away, he never forgot her. He would send gifts to her friends just to honor her memory. He'd welcome her relatives so warmly. His devotion to her really did transcend death itself.
There's this amazing quote from his later wife, Aisha, that really gives us a window into just how deep this devotion ran. She once said, almost in exasperation, "It is as if there is no woman in the world other than Khadeejah." I mean, that tells you everything, doesn't it? It shows how profoundly his love and respect for his first wife remained with him forever.
So, what's the crucial point here? It's that this story isn't just about the beginning of a faith. It's about the very human, very spiritual foundation it was all built on. Khadeejah's role in this was just indispensable. She was the first believer, the first supporter, the first source of comfort. Her wisdom and her strength were the bedrock that allowed a moment of private fear to grow into the beginning of a global message.
And there's a saying of the Prophet that just perfectly sums all of this up. He said, "The world is mata'ah." And mata'ah is basically anything you can get enjoyment or provision from. And the best mata'ah of the world is a righteous wife. You see? For him, the story of the first revelation is completely inseparable from the story of the partner who stood by him. And that kind of leaves us with a question to think about, doesn't it? What does it really mean to be that pillar of support for someone in a moment that's about to change the entire world?